Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt. I was here yesterday doing some WordPress plugin development, live streaming it, and I had a good experience. I think everything turned out pretty well. So today I'm back and I'll be continuing working on a WordPress plugin for all of you. Uh, Going to mostly be working in PHP today. My hope is to get uh, our work onto the front end of the site so that probably Monday of next week we can pick up with actually doing some of the styling, so some of the HTML and CSS work to make the form look good on the website. But today we will be doing more back-end coding. And yesterday I kind of talked a lot, and I felt kind of the urge to explain everything in great detail. But today I'm going to actually work more on just coding and just working, commenting where necessary, or thinking out loud my way through things, but just really trying to get my hands on the keyboard and get to work. So with that, I will go ahead and switch over to my screen and we'll get to work today. Before I get started, I should say that leave a comment or chat during the live stream if you have any questions, and I'll try to be responsive to those. I'll try to remember to check them periodically. So without further ado, let's switch over. And the first thing I want to do here is load up my local development environment. So I normally do that with a tool called Vagrant, which will just kind of spin up a virtual server here on my laptop. This takes a minute, and it will ask me for my password at some point, so bear with me here. The reason I do this is so that I don't have to use a remote server. It just speeds up development, and if I break anything, it's a lot easier for me to fix it while I'm here in this environment, as opposed to trying to SSH into a server that may be out in San Francisco or in New York. I have everything right here, literally at my fingertips. So, okay, well, we'll let that go, and I can load up some other stuff here. So just open a new tab in the command line, and I want to actually go look at where my site is and go to my plugins folder. That should be good. And then my plugin that I'm working on is called Honored Stories. So I guess if anybody is new to this live stream, I'll show that really quickly. What we're actually working on today is a plugin for this company. This site I'm actually in the process of rebuilding, and as part of the contract, I told them I would recreate an ability for them to have their clients submit these memorials. So essentially what we're dealing with is a form where a pet owner can post some information about their pet, including a picture, a brief story, and some other details. And the old implementation of this that we're redoing looks like this. You have all of these pets of their past customers, and you can click on one and just see the information and honor that pet. So pretty straightforward, actually pretty simple as far as web forms go. However, to do it right, in my opinion anyway, we want to use WordPress. So I'm using a tool called CMB2, which I showed yesterday on GitHub, and this article by Justin Sternberg to create a form on the front end of my WordPress site that when a customer comes and submits a story about their pet and submits that form, it gets saved as a draft post on the WordPress website so that the WordPress administrator can then go in and approve it or deny it or delete it or whatever, but there's some kind of moderation. So then when the moderator approves it, it gets published on the web live. Okay, so that should have given Vagrant plenty of time to spin up here. Let's see, switch back to my other tab. And yeah, it's waiting for my password, so put that in. And all this is doing right now is turning on a server that runs on my computer, as I mentioned before, so that when I now am working on Home to Heaven dot dev, I should have my work in progress local website. Perfect. So that's loading locally, and my honored stories area, just for showing you the new side of things, right here in this empty space is where I plan to put this new form that we're working on. So unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, today we're kind of working on the foundation of this. It's a lot of back-end stuff, so we're not working on making it look pretty, and it's not going to be very visual today. I'll be just going step by step through this article, kind of taking these code snippets, modifying them to fit my needs, and just kind of going through this until the goal today anyway is to, on this page, actually output the form. And the form will work in a sense that submitted forms will be stored in the WordPress database. And so then, as I mentioned before, next week we'll start in on actually making the form look good. But today the goal is to just get a correctly coded form showing up here. So I actually made a short outline of how I wanted to do this. Let me just make sure the streaming hasn't crashed on me. Okay, looks good so far. So the first step here is registering our CMB2, which this stands for Custom Meta Boxes number 2. And meta boxes in WordPress are a term that just basically mean like a UI or like a form of some kind. And you'll definitely see an example of a CMB2 meta box today. That's the first thing we're going to do. After that, we'll make something called a shortcode. And in WordPress, shortcodes, if you look up here in my address bar, just kind of look like this. So ours might look like this. And it's just a way so that the client can take this little shortcode, this little snippet up here, and put it in any one of their WordPress pages, and it will tell WordPress, hey, use this shortcode and do something with PHP. And in our case, that something will be getting the form and loading it on the page. So if, with that same logic, if I take this and I go to edit this page, and you can see I'm logged in as an admin here, so I have this handy edit link here. My users wouldn't necessarily see this, but if I do this shortcode right, it will allow me to come in here to my post, and I introduce what I'm doing on this page, but then I have this shortcode that'll just go in here like this. And assuming I were to update this and then look at the page again on the front end, WordPress will handle all the magic in the background to load my custom code in there. So that was step 2. And it actually looks like my mouse batteries are dying, so I hope that doesn't cause us any big problems. So we'll keep pressing on. And then the last step will be to kind of put that shortcode in place like I just showed you, and just make sure that on the front end we're actually getting a valid form out with the right fields. So I have just over an hour today, and these are the three things we'll try to do just by following along with the posts. Okay, so I'm going to switch back for a sec to my camera. Just see, it looks like we have one person watching. Hello. You can feel free to drop anything in the chat if you have any questions, and I'll try to remember to come back here and check periodically. Okay, so wow, I've already spent about 10 minutes getting to this point, so let's go ahead and get started. So we'll start by registering the form object with CMB2. And so really the first thing we have to do, I think I put CMB2 in my project, but I haven't linked it up yet. So let's see. Here's my project. I'll just do ls to look at it, and you can see I just have 2 files right now. I prefer this list format. You see, I have a folder and I have a file. So in my folder, I have a few different things, including another folder that I've just named third party. So just want to demonstrate that, yep, CMB2 is in here. And I put that in here, showing that this is the contents of that. Okay, sorry about that. I hadn't switched my camera back over, so let's do that again. Okay, so these are the perils of doing something live. Sorry about that. So I'm just in my Honored Stories folder. You can actually see that right here. And when I do this list command that I have set up, you can just see that there's a folder called includes, because those are the files I'm including in my plugin, as well as an init file. I just wanted to show that the includes folder has a third-party folder in it that has the CMB2 project saved in there. And you can see these are kind of the files that make up CMB2. So how I got to this point was just simply by going to CMB2's GitHub page and basically downloading a zip of this entire project and putting that folder into my project, as you saw there. The one thing I did try to do, and this is just a personal preference, I deleted this languages folder, and I have yet to see if this is going to come back to bite me. But this, as you'll see, in the project has a lot of files in it that I just don't want to bother with transmitting around and keeping in my own project. So for better or for worse, maybe that's a bad decision of mine, but I wanted to try to remove this from the project at this point. And if it turns out that we need that for the project to function properly, then I'll just go ahead and put it back in. So just a warning there, we might have some troubles with that. Okay, so CMB2 is in my project, and the next thing I need to do is tell my plugin to actually load CMB2 so that all of its code and all of its functions will be available to me. So luckily they have some great documentation here, and it's pretty easy to get started. I believe there's actually a getting started link, and I'm just scanning looking for it right now. Okay, so it's basic usage instructions. So when you click here, you have a kind of a quick start, getting started, etc., etc. Now this is a good point to mention that this project does also have a WordPress plugin. So if you don't want to go through the hassle of downloading it, putting it in a plugin, as I've done here, you can actually just install this plugin on your site, on your WordPress site, and then use something like a functions.php. If you're familiar with WordPress, that's normally just a place where you can kind of dump extra code, for the lack of a better term. You can just dump your extra code in there and work with CMB2 that way. But I prefer not to do that, so I like to actually include it in my project, as I've shown you here. I actually downloaded that repository and copied and pasted it into my file system. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the command line or get intimidated by it, this is all we're dealing with. We have my Git for version tracking, and then these two actual project files. And in here, I've just kind of downloaded, and extracted the CMB2 project and just put it in there. But just because I put it in there, it doesn't mean that my WordPress plugin actually knows to load it. So the next thing I'll do is actually open up my code editor, and no, I don't want to download it now. That was just an update notification. And just kind of open up my project in this code editor and just show you that yesterday we worked on this, but it's really basic at this point. We are loading a custom post type file, but you see there's nowhere in here where we're saying, hey, load CMB2. So that's actually the next step. And I think we'll just add it right here. So I think they call it Bootstrap in the documentation, so we'll try to stick with that. Bootstrap the CMB2 autoloader is what we're trying to do here. So that code will be coming up pretty shortly. All right, let me do some tab management here. Close that down. Yeah, we don't need this right now. Saw that. Yeah, here's where we're working from. All right, the rest of this looks good. Just gonna get these two kind of out of the way. Keep things tidy here so I don't get confused. All right, so here's where we want to start. Under getting started, it says first that we need to bootstrap and start the engine. It says note, if you're installing the plugin from WordPress.org, which I showed you previously, just skip this step. because the plugin does this for you. That's another advantage of it. But for me, I do want to take this code and actually put it into my plugin file so that CMB2 gets loaded when my plugin file gets loaded. And some differences here in format, so just clean that up a little bit. This doesn't really matter technically, but it's just nice to have things consistent. I actually prefer this style. And okay, that's all looking good, except these file paths are incorrect. As I showed, we put our CMB2 project into this path here. So includes third-party CMB2. So if I put that out into a comment just to kind of brainstorm this out here, it's gonna look like includes third-party CMB2. Yeah, and then inside that folder is a file called init.php. And you see this is this is the base file for the CMB2 project. So you can see here we're trying to load init.php. Furthermore, well, let's continue with this. So init.php. So this is kind of what we're looking for. Add one more slash in here just for clarity. So in my base project file, we're looking at this path. Now, this dir just means the directory that this file, the init.php, is in. So it's relative to that directory. So great. Perfect. Okay. So instead of using this here, I'm going to make my own string. So why don't I just call it like CMB2 relative path. And then I'll just actually use what I've already done up here. Okay, so I made something called a string, just kind of a series of characters, and saved it to a variable. That will just help me out down here, because I can say if a file exists called this, go look from the current directory and then look in this path. If that file exists, then go ahead and require it. So let's do that again. So see, I made that string. Now I can reuse that variable instead of typing this over and over again. And because I have control over this code, I know that my path doesn't have capital letters, and that's the only reason why we had two of these. So if we go back to here, it's basically very conservatively, CMB2 is asking, hey, is it in a path with these lowercase letters, or is it in a path with these uppercase, stylized version of the name of the project? Case sensitivity is important in operating systems and web servers, so they have to check for both. Maybe an old version of the plugin used this style, and maybe the current version uses this. But for backwards compatibility, they want to check for both. But because I named this file myself, or this folder, I should say, with lowercase letters, I know I don't need this, so I'm going to remove it. And then this is actually a good practice where you see how this if statement is asking if this file exists before it tries to load it. That is actually a good practice because you don't know if that file is there. I mean, you have reason to expect that it's there, maybe if you're writing the code, but you don't know for sure. So it's a good habit to get into checking. So actually up here, where I'm requiring one of my own files, maybe it would be wise if I did the same thing and just checked like, hey, does this file exist? And if this evaluates to true, which file exists, return true if this file is found, false otherwise. So if it's true, then I will require that file. So just some housekeeping there to kind of make things a little bit safer. And you know what I'm going to do at this point is save this file with Command S, and then just go over here and try to refresh my WordPress site, because like I was describing yesterday, most of the time when I make a stupid error, which I do all the time, like this one, or actually seeing one up here, the interpreter is telling you that this is a problem. So luckily, these messages are usually pretty good ways to know what's going on. So I'll troubleshoot this in one moment. I just want to take a pause here and check out my comments to see if anybody has any questions at this point. So I'll be right back. Okay, all is quiet in the chat room. So back to the screen, back to this error. So we have an error here. Warning, call user function array expects parameter 1, and this is a big clue, to be a valid callback. But this function is not found or is invalid. Okay, so it looks like I'm having trouble with my namespacing. So let's see what's going on with my namespacing. It's saying it can't find the register function. And I'm just looking through here to see what the error might be. I'm not really seeing it. So here I have my namespace, honored stories, custom post type, and then a function called register. So let me split this out actually to 2 screens. Over here, I want to see my custom post type, my namespace. Oh, I bet I know what's happening. So I probably just shot myself in the foot here when I made this if check. For some reason, it seems like it's skipping over this, and this file is now not getting loaded. So that's my theory. One way to verify that is, instead of just checking for it, just load it like we were before, assuming it's there, and see if the error goes away. So reloading the page. And yeah, so that fixed the problem. So actually the problem is here where I'm checking if this file exists. And I think I need to use, just like they did down there, the correct starting point, which is the current directory. So let's see if that helps. Okay, that looks a lot better. So just for the sake of being consistent, let's do this throughout. And then like before, I don't want to repeat myself. So I'm going to take this whole thing and turn it into a variable. And we'll just call that stories custom post type path. Okay. All right, so now let's load this again, just make sure everything looks good. All right, I think we are doing just fine here. So to kind of do a quick recap, I'll close a couple of these extra code windows here. Go back to actually one. What we've done here is we did some cleanup just now on a file path and loading that first custom post type file that I talked about yesterday. And the big thing we've done here is actually load CMB2 into our project. At least I'm pretty sure we've done that. Now the way to verify this is to actually try to create a meta box and see if CMB2 cooperates, because then I'll know for sure that it's loaded. So I think at this point, looking back at my outline, yeah, so we're just now getting to step one. So really what we did first was actually, we'll use their terminology. That makes sense. We just spent some time doing this, and now we're going to move on to this. So I think it's feeling like time for another file, because I was talking yesterday about how I like to keep my base file here clean and short, just so it's kind of easy to get a high level view of what's going on. And I feel like the next thing we should do is actually load another file for CMB2 to work with. And it looks like my mouse is dying. I might need to run and change the batteries here in a moment, but okay, it's got some life left in it, so let's keep going. So I think in my includes folder, what I'll probably do, make a new folder, and I just like to call it something like CMB2 customizations. That'll do. And in this folder, I want to make a file, and I'll just I'll save this file, and I will just call it my primary meta box. Now, why don't I make it a better name? That's a terrible name. Why don't I call it the primary honored stories form? I think that's a little bit better, and I want it to be a PHP file. Yeah, all right, so we're looking good there. Just so I don't regret this later, I'm going to add this PHP tag up here and just leave a comment. Because I just realized that I've been a bad developer and I should probably make a git commit at this point. So git, as I talked about yesterday, is just a way to keep track of your files. So if I change a line in a file, and actually I'll just try to show this rather than tell. My log here, you can see I had my initial commit yesterday, and then I removed a custom template filter, and I can even like look at these changes. This interface is probably not the best one for me to demonstrate it on. The web might be better, but you can kind of see here that like in this particular commit, which is represented by this hash code here, I removed this line and I added this line. Oh no, sorry, this is showing the differences. So anyway, Git is useful for this. So throughout my development process, I try to just commit often so that I have this like fine-grained way to go back and look at the changes I made to my files. And after I do this commit, I'll go to Bitbucket and show. So I have an alias set up, and I'll show what this is eventually because I don't remember off the top of my head. But when I type git a, I'll do it again, git a, the system will kind of go through each of the files and show me the changes kind of one at a time. This is a chance for me to do a code review of my own. And you can see here, these are some of the changes we were just working on, like adding this kind of file path style to loading our custom post type and adding in CMB2 file path here. So these changes all look good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and press yes for this hunk. Good. Now you can see here on my command line that this is something I've set up to show me that there are still untracked files or some changes that I haven't committed yet. So to me that says that I must have some new files that I've added that aren't in this commit. And just like you would expect, remember I added that new folder here. Git is saying, hey, I noticed there's a new folder here, but we're not tracking it. So it's kind of warning me. But I like to keep my commits as focused as possible. So I think just committing this stuff right now will be great. So I'm going to ignore that and just do a git commit with a message. That's what this -m is for, message, saying that I add CMB2 bootstrap, and so we'll say a safer, more safe, I don't know, we'll call it safer loading of custom post type, because remember we're checking now to see if that file exists before we try to load it. So looks like a good commit message to me. All right, and now I like to push. Pushing it just sends it up to the cloud, to use a cliche. And I'll show you actually what that did on Bitbucket. Bitbucket here is where we're storing the code base, or our repository, as it's called in Git lingo. And every time I push, it will send my changes up in the form of a commit to Bitbucket. So you can see here all my commits. We had our initial one, just like I was showing in the command line. We had this one I did yesterday, and then now we have this one. What's really cool about it is if I click on a commit, and this is the beauty of using Git, whether you use Bitbucket or GitHub, doesn't matter to me, but having something like this where you can see, oh, I removed this, added this, I removed this, added this big chunk, it's really valuable, especially if you're on a team and you have different developers working on the same code. Or and this will happen, not if, but when you make a mistake and you introduce a bug that you didn't intend to, you can go back through your commits kind of systematically, and there are different approaches to that, but you can go back and find where the mistake was made and easily kind of roll back your code to its initial state or some good state, and then work forward from there. So that's what our code looks like so far. You can just see in the source tab here that it's just tracking all of our files, So everything's looking good in Bitbucket, so I won't spend any more time here. All right, so let's do a done list, because this is done. And now we are here registering our meta box. And go back to Sublime and load up our form. Good. So this is where I'll refer back to Justin Sternberg's post to kind of copy and paste, as I mentioned I would be doing a lot. Copy and paste and then modify this to fit our needs. Why is this scrolling so slowly? Okay, good. There we go. We want this first chunk. And Justin says, first step, we need to register our form. This is standard form and field registration. And I would just say for CMB2. This is not standard form and field registration in every content management system. But if you're in WordPress and you're using CMB2, this is how you do it. And even if you're in WordPress and you're using something else like Advanced Custom Fields, which is another popular library for doing the same sort of thing, it will look very similar. But I'm just going to paste this all in and then clean it up. And maybe this is not the best way to do it, but whatever. We're committed, so we're all in. All right, so first thing I would like to do here is probably give this a namespace. And this is something new that I've been working with. So I might struggle a little bit here, I'm not going to lie, to get this set up. So what I would like to do is actually use one that I've used before and just kind of modify that. Typical lazy me. Just want to keep things as simple as possible. Okay, so this is my honored stories. Honored stories form registration. And I think we can probably do a little bit better than that, but that's good enough for now for me. So okay, so we've namespaced this correctly. Now we're going to declare a function, as this says right here. I don't necessarily want this or this, so I'm just going to call it, just to identify it. Even just calling it this would work because I've namespaced it properly up here. So anyway, but we'll call it this. I like that. It identifies it. And then inside this function, we're making a variable called CMB. And this variable is going to hold our form object, or the box, the meta box object. So this is calling a function that I imagine is returning some other object. And I would love to go look at this code right now with you, but I think it's best that we just press on here. So I actually do want to make a lot of progress here today. So not a big fan of this code format, but I can fix that later. I just kind of nitpick over those extra spaces. And then this ID value in the array, it's associating this with the name of the form, essentially. And I'm actually okay with that. It looks good to me. In fact, I would like to change as little as possible in here so that it makes it easier as we go through the tutorial, and I'm not having to change every little thing. One thing I think we'll need to change is not a post here. We're actually dealing with honored stories, if I'm remembering how to do this correctly. And I'll verify all of this in a moment. Okay, so for all of the rest of these right now, I'll leave them as is. This might actually get us pretty far with what we're trying to do today. The only thing I may need to change here is addressing, obviously, this function name. And potentially adding a namespace. So sometimes just put a to-do there. But just to show you what's going on here, we talked about action yesterday in WordPress, and they're just opportunities for you to hook into somebody else's code. So CMB2 is doing a million things. I don't know, don't quote me on that number, but it's doing a lot of stuff in the background. But they're saying here, you know, at this point in the code, there is an action or a hook called CMB2 init where you can attach your own code to. And so like we did yesterday, I'll show you with a comment. This is a function called add action that is a part of WordPress, but this function takes two parameters. The first one being the name of a hook, and the second parameter being the name of a function. And the hook is provided by CMB2. This is in their code base somewhere. And the function is one that I've created that is named up here. So with this code here, we should now, because I tied it to the honored stories object type, on our honored stories editor, I would expect to see a form on the admin side of things. So if this doesn't crash and burn, then we'll be in pretty good shape. So let's see here on my dashboard of WordPress. And in my honored stories, if I add a new honored story, Okay, there is not a meta box here. So make sure. Okay, that's fine. And I can actually, I'm realizing now that as before, just like where we loaded CMB2, just like we loaded our custom post type, we actually need to include this file so that it's loaded with the rest of our plugin. So right now, I made a file. I think it's good, but WordPress doesn't even know it exists, let alone is it trying to load it, if that makes sense. So what I need to do here, a lot like before, is make a path. And that path is going to be in my includes folder. And then I think it's just sitting right in there. No, it's under CMB2 customizations, as you can see here. Includes CMB2 customizations, and then the file name. I just expand this out a little bit. That it's primary honored stories .php. Yep. And then a lot like before, if the file exists, relative from this directory and located at this path using a variable. Just want to make sure I have the right number of parentheses here. Then we will load it the same. Okay, so now that should be loading it. Let me just kind of make a little comment here. Load our okay, so now this doesn't crash on me. Okay, so I think we're on our way here, but we're not quite there yet. And it may be once again that I messed this up somehow. So we can try that. Yeah, and it's complaining. It's saying, hey, this file isn't there. No such file or directory. So when I tried to load my primary honored stories file from my CMB2 customizations folder, it couldn't find it. All right, so that's one that we can easily work with. So let me just look at this path on my local system, and honored stories includes customizations, primary honored stories. Okay. So you see the name of this file here that I've highlighted is primary honored stories form. And what I tried to load when I made this path was primary honored stories.php. So silly mistake there. And let's just try this again with the check turned off. Okay, we still have a problem, but I think I know exactly what's causing that. So this form registration function that I'm calling is not found. And I think, as I mentioned, it's my namespace here. I'm trying to get disciplined about using these, and sometimes I'm really bad about thinking through this. So I just prepended or copied and pasted to the beginning my path or my namespace, and let's see if that does better. So this is useful, even though it looks kind of messy down here especially, and it's kind of causing me some troubles. It's useful to prevent conflicts in naming. So if I didn't have that there, and I didn't use this namespace up here, anybody else who named their function this and was also running a plugin on my website, it could cause the site to crash. So something that has plagued WordPress for a long time, and that's why you'll often see function names with these really long, like prepended sort of like my plugin something something. You know, people would do this like to crazy lengths in some regards to try to make sure that everything they named in their program was unique. But I believe that namespacing helps alleviate that. So see, I have a nice legible short function name here, and it's kind of being buffered by this namespace here. Now, naming is hard. That's one of the old jokes in computer science and programming. So you see here, when you look at this full name with the namespace, it's kind of redundant. But you know, I'm okay with that for now. It's always something you can refactor later if it's worth it. But I'm more of the mindset of like, let's get this thing working and move on. So for better or for worse, that's where I'm at in my skills. So I'm refreshing this again to see how we're doing here. All right. So now I don't see any errors. We're loading everything up, but we still do not see the meta box. And because I'm unsure of whether or not this is correct, I want to try to verify that WordPress is loading this function. And this is a real quick way I do this sometimes. I call this function called WP_die. And WP_die is a way to kind of, on purpose, crash whatever you're doing and exit. And also you can pass in a message. So like I can say to myself, hey, I'm inside the honored stories. Sorry about that. Honored stories form register. And now, you know, ideally on the front end or in the system, just in general, WordPress will load this file because I've required it. And then just going along here, it'll register this function, right? Because that comes first in the code. It'll attach the function up there to this action, and then when CMB2 is loading up and hits this action, it actually runs this function. It executes it. So functions execute starting here at the first line, and the first thing it will do is hit this call, and this basically kills the loading. So if I refresh that page and I see this, I know that I'm at least loading this function and that the problem I'm having is something after that point. And I hope that makes sense. And that was a long explanation just to basically say that, you know, if I want to quickly know if I'm getting to some point in the code, I will use this function call to verify it. So let me actually save that and switch back over and reload this page. Now what I expect to see is that it crashes and shows me my error message. At least that's what I hope to see. Yeah, so see, I intentionally crashed it and it's outputting my message. This is probably the quickest and like dirtiest or cheapest, whatever you want to call it, way to troubleshoot something. So it's definitely not the most technically savvy or the fanciest, but man, it works because we pretty quickly figured out that, yeah, we are in fact using the correct namespace here, and WordPress is trying to execute this function. So something in this code here, all this stuff where I'm trying to add these fields, is not working. I have a hunch that it's this here that I messed something up where this said post and I changed it to honored stories. I didn't do something right. That's my hypothesis. And a lot of troubleshooting is kind of experimentation. So I always like to say, here's what I think is going on. How do I test it? So if I think this this is incorrect there, then the right thing to do is to say, well, how can I test that this is incorrect? I'm going to comment that out. And I can test that this is incorrect by using basically the default, which maybe I should have done in the first place, just to kind of do this one step at a time. This was the default that you can see over here in Justin's code. And I thought I was so smart and changed it. But you see here, he had just post in his code, which this should tie the meta box onto the post or the blog post page of WordPress. You know, I tried to get ambitious and just say, oh, I know what this is. Let me change it. But the way to see if this is the trouble spot is to see if this works like this. And so what I would expect, you know, another part of troubleshooting is you have to know what you're going to expect. If I go back here to my WordPress dashboard and I look at my posts and I go to add a new post, then, you know, WordPress should have loaded that meta box onto this post page. So let me collapse some of this other garbage in here that is just put there by my theme. Man, and I still don't see it. So yeah, I still do not see it. So that hypothesis was wrong. So this may not have been the problem. Um, so going back through our steps, yeah, that still all looks good to me. So I'm just going to do some cleanup here, save this, and then go back to my base file. Just take one more look at everything. So bootstrapping the loader, and maybe we're not in fact loading CMB2. That's a possibility that I don't think we've explored yet. So using the technique I just kind of demonstrated, why don't we just try here, and if we get to this point, we know that CMB2 is about to load. And another way to kind of do this, to kind of guarantee that you get an output, is to do an else off of that if. So another branch that said CMB2 didn't load. So the way this would work is the system checks, you know, if we find that file, go ahead and die and just say that, let us know that, hey, we got to this point, CMB2 is about to load. Otherwise, just die and just tell us this evaluated to false, so we're not going to load CMB2. So let's see what that gets us. So my idea here is that CMB2 is not loading for some reason. And I have my own doubts about that, but let's just see if we refresh this page what happens. So CMB2 is about to load, great. So this is not an issue. And I'm pretty sure we're loading this correctly, right? Because we tested that it died. And I'm just thinking out loud here because I'm not sure what else is going on. Let me maybe look at Justin's article and see if there was a step that I missed. Hmm. Could it be this part here, save fields set to false, prevent CMB2 from saving the field. So this is something I've not used before, so maybe I don't understand how it works. What I thought when I initially read this was that CMB2 wouldn't save the field's values to the database, rather than, I guess it could be interpreted as, I'm trying to add these fields here, but CMB2 isn't saving them to the post editor. But I don't know if that's how that works. Let's see. Just looking along here. And then one other thing I can do, just let you look at that GIF for a second, is look at this again. So if I would have read the documentation, it looks like they're using a different action than what I'm using in my code. Now, I don't know if this makes a difference, but because I'm trying to use that, at least initially, use that admin box on, I'm sorry, use the CMB2 meta box on the admin side, that I would want to register it with the admin hook. So that's my next idea here. Let me save this. Hope I didn't change anything. And you see here, I'm adding this action to the CMB2 init. And if I go a little split screen here, you'll see what they're doing is up here using the admin init hook. So why don't I just try that? Just because I'm honestly out of other ideas, and I see that as a pretty big difference here. And tell you what, if this doesn't work, I'll stop the live stream and I'll figure this out, and I'll come back when I have a way forward for you guys. I don't want to waste anybody's time here. And just for the sake of being consistent, I went ahead and moved that action up to the top of the file, which I think is perfectly fine. Just want to get some of my line spacing here. Okay, so I'm going to save this. I still have it set to post, right? Yep, looks good. And I want to just refresh this new post page, see if maybe now I can get my meta box to load. Damn, it looks like it didn't work. So I'm just going to take these two things that I don't know what they are, and my next step is to comment them out. So remove them effectively from the file, because maybe one of those is causing it not to display here, and refresh the page. Yeah, still not looking good. Okay, well, as I said before, I don't quite know what's going on here. This is kind of the downside of me doing this live. So I'll stop the stream now. I'll probably come back a little bit later when I have this figured out. It's about 20 minutes before I had planned to stop, but you know, rather than sitting here basically wasting time and looking silly, I want to go and figure this out, and I'll come back, and when we pick up, I'll explain exactly what fixed this issue, and then we'll press on from there. So just to recap, today we got this done. We bootstrapped the autoloader. Seems to be loading CMB2 as far as I can tell, and now we're working on registering this meta box. And I just want to be able to see it on the admin side so I know it's there. So I'm trying to figure out why I'm not seeing it, and I'm having some trouble. So thanks for watching today, and Comments are welcome if you'd like. If not, no problem. Just keep tuning in, and I hope it's helpful. Thanks.